Hi, my name's Amy Thwaites and I welcome you all to the 12th George Briscoe Kerferd Oration. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. Today's oration celebrates connection and friendship between two nations, and more closely, two small rural communities, Indigo Shire and Otaro Island, East Timor. Timor-Leste is one of Australia's closest geographical neighbours, but in terms of wealth and development, it could hardly be further away. Years of tumultuous history under Portuguese and Indonesian rule, followed by a violent struggle for independence, have left Timor one of the poorest and most underdeveloped nations in the world. Social justice, a consistent theme of the Kerferd Oration, is an extremely important issue in Timor-Leste today. My own involvement with Timor-Leste began in 2004 when I was a member of the inaugural Junior Council of Indigo Shire. I propose that the council look outside the Shire and indeed outside the country for a cause and a source of cultural exchange. My family and I visited Timor in 2005. Soon my idea was taken into much more capable hands, and in 2008 Indigo Shire signed an official friendship agreement with Otaro Island. I'm honoured to be here today, and I'm gratified to see how far we've come and how much we've had to give and gain in this relationship. So I hope you've all had a chance to look at the program. It's full of information about the oration and some of our special guests and the history of this day. There are a number of guests that I would like to personally welcome. Senor Francisco Jorge dos Santos, who is Director of a teacher training organisation in Timor, which is supported by the Otaro Island Friendship Community here in Beechworth. We have several descendants of George Briscoe Kerferd today, Ian Young, Robert Kirkwood and Jennifer Locke, who've come respectively from Queensland, Melbourne and Sydney just for today. I'd like to welcome Ms Cathy McGowan, AO and the Federal Member for Indi. I'd also like to welcome the Honourable Tim Fisher. And I have a few apologies from Councillor Peter Croucher, Peter Graham, OAM and Mayor Emeritus, Professor John Thwaites, who was the 2007 orator, and also the great-granddaughter of George Briscoe Kerferd, Anne Bonnell. So in Timor-Leste, the children begin their day at school with their national anthem, as do our local primary school kids begin their week by singing our own anthem. And so we will begin our oration with the playing of the Australian national anthem, sung by the kids of Beechworth Primary School, followed by the Timor-Leste national anthem, sung by the children of Akusi. If you could please stand for the anthems. invite our orator, Ms. Jenny Coles, to the stage. Jenny Coles is the liaison representative to Her Excellency Kirsty Sword-Guzmau, who is the former First Lady and current wife of the Prime Minister and Goodwill Ambassador for Education for Timor-Leste. Based in both Australia and Timor-Leste, Jenny supports Her Excellency's endeavours in ensuring access to education for all Timorese as the cornerstone to addressing development challenges of nation building. In the late 90s, news of the referendum in Timor-Leste and the ensuing violence achieved prominence on the world stage, and it was at that time that Jenny became an activist for both Timor-Leste's independence and issues related to the Timor Sea Justice Campaign. In 2002, Jenny travelled to Timor-Leste with the Mary MacKillop Institute and continued to fundraise and volunteer with humanitarian projects for a further 4 years. In 2006, Jenny relocated to Dili and took up the role of administering university scholarship programs and capacity building initiatives with the Mary MacKillop Institute. In late 2006, Jenny accepted a position as Her Excellency's personal assistant and project manager, before relocating back to Australia in 2011 as the liaison representative to Her Excellency in Australia. Jenny is currently coordinating a team of architects and key stakeholders in the design and construction of a new type of school which will act as a model for the nation's future school constructions. Jenny is a board member of the Shanana Reading Room and the Dare Memorial Museum, which is by Australian soldiers in recognition of the contribution of Timorese soldiers to the Allied forces in World War II. She is also a joint convener of the Timor Sea Justice Forum in Sydney. Jenny is here only for the day, having spent the past 2 days at a conference in Melbourne on Timor-Leste, and tomorrow she flies out to Dili. So please join me in welcoming Miss Jenny Coles to the podium to deliver the 12th George Briscoe Kerferd Oration. The cost of a cappuccino is in the manner in which it is shared.
Distinguished guests, ladies, gentlemen and friends, I am so humbled to have this extraordinary opportunity to present the 12th esteemed Kerferd Oration. I would like to extend sincere appreciation to the Kerferd Oration Committee and in particular to Chairman Mr Ian McKinlay and fellow member Mrs Joan Sims for the invitation and the gesture of acknowledgement for my endeavours that this represents. It is wonderful to be back in Beechworth on such an incredibly beautiful day. It was in 2004 that I paid a most memorable visit here in my capacity as New South Wales Business Development Manager for, at the time, Australia Post. Together with national colleagues, we travelled the highways and waterways of the Indigo Shire in visiting some of the most significant historic towns in our nation. At the time, we were studying the iconic role of post offices in serving communities, and nowhere were the learning outcomes more revealing than in this stunning, unspoiled pocket of rural Victoria. Here today, in the proud tradition of George Briscoe Kerferd, we are able to consider how shared experiences and ideals contribute to forging communities both locally and internationally. In our role as global citizens, we are looking now more than ever at finding imaginative and robust ways forward when seeking social justice in this world. Through the prism of Timor-Leste, I am honoured to share insights and personal reflections on foreign policy, commercial relations, aid with our closest neighbour, and to acknowledge perhaps the most powerful connection of all, that of the enduring friendships that exists between our nation's peoples. Timor-Leste, the youngest nation in our region, has been my home for 6 years and a further 4 years from Sydney, I have continued to manage projects and support the works of Her Excellency Ms Kerferd Oration, Goodwill Ambassador for Education and wife of the Prime Minister of Timor-Leste. Over that time, I have witnessed the restoration of peace, the rebuilding of infrastructure such as roads, schools and clinics, the establishment of all the major institutions of the state, including a police force, judiciary, national parliament, foreign diplomatic service, education and health delivery systems, to name just a few. And all that in just 12 short years since my first visit to Dili, at a time that coincided with the Declaration of Independence in May 2002. You might be wondering why a middle-class businesswoman climbing the slippery slopes of the corporate ladder in Australia Post would choose to throw her lot in with the people of an impoverished and conflict-ridden neighbouring country. Let us briefly turn back in time to the mid-90s. One of my most treasured leisure times was singing with a community a cappella choir in Glebe in Sydney's inner west. Under the insightful tutelage of our director, we learned a number of hauntingly beautiful songs in Tetun, the most widely spoken language in Timor-Leste. We then performed together with a small and truly talented choir of Timorese students who were committed to building consciousness of the issues facing their occupied homeland. It was through these humble gatherings that I learned of the courage, resilience and the dignity of the people of Timor-Leste in defending their right to self-determination in the face of the oppressive Suharto regime. This spurred me into action. As an Australian, having grown up in a peaceful, stable democracy with all the benefits of a quality education, I felt a moral duty to contribute to righting a wrong. It must be said that my solidarity with those seeking justice and independence has also been fuelled at times by a profound sense of anger and shame. At that time, eager to address my ignorance of the prevailing circumstances in Timor, I started trawling through the limited information available on the history of the country. In tracing the period of Portuguese colonisation, it became evident that the social, political and economic control of the people at that time was maintained by reinforcing the isolation of tribal communities throughout the island. The unforgiving terrain rendered communities so remote that in fact still over 32 distinct languages exist today. As a side note, to fully appreciate the impact of this isolation, it becomes apparent and so revealing when we see today the Prime Minister, who already speaks 5 languages fluently, still needing to engage the services of interpreters and translators in certain community consultations. Portugal's 500-year colonial rule was described as a period of benign neglect. It exploited Timor's resources and invested little in either infrastructure or social institutions. There was limited development in the nation throughout these years. The histories of Australia and Timor were to intersect dramatically with the onset of World War II. And it was so heartening to hear that one of the standout events during the Indigo Shire's focus on Timor-Leste this year was an evening with Major General Roger Powell, in which he spoke of the time when Australian troops landed in Timor-Leste in 1942. It was an effort to divert Japanese troops from their intended target, being the Australian mainland. The enduring connections are legendary in our respective nations. Your friends will not forget you. These were the words that were translated into Portuguese and printed on tens of thousands of leaflets that rained down across the mountains of Timor from Hercules Plains, evacuating Australian commandos back to Darwin, leaving the Timorese in the hands of the rampaging Japanese troops. The diggers were distraught at abandoning the very same companions who had kept them alive, knowing that their fate in return would be torturous death. Their nightmares were realised when history would record between 40 to 60,000 Timorese lives were sacrificed. The Australian contingent lost 40. As George Briscoe Kerferd did in recognising the tremendous importance of museums in our communities way back in 1860, so too Ms. Kirsty Sword-Guzmao committed to establishing a museum that in this instance would serve to honour and give meaning to the legacy of the 2nd and 2nd 4th Commandos and contribute to the payment of the debt of honour owed to the countless Timorese and others who lost their lives in World War II. In 2009, together with the community of Fatanaba, I had the privilege of project managing the Dare Memorial Museum, located just on the outskirts of Dili. This was neither a government nor a military initiative, and it is hoped that students and visitors alike will take away a profound sense of the power of friendship and solidarity in linking peoples and communities throughout history. An opportunity to repay the debt of honour was tragically overlooked in 1975. Despite breaches of international law, the Australian government gave tacit approval for the Indonesian military invasion and annexation of East Timor on the 7th of December 1975. Not even the killing in cold blood of 5 Australian and British journalists in Balibo would distract from the war plan. Indonesia invaded Timor-Leste by air and sea with bombing of such relentless ferocity that it would scar an entire nation. Against an unarmed population, the savagery of the Indonesian military often relied on weaponry cost-saving devices, such as forcibly relocating entire Timorese communities to harsh terrain unable to support vegetation, and allowing the natural forces of famine to do their bidding. It is not my intention to detail the atrocities and acts of cruelty perpetrated against the Timorese during these times. Suffice it to say, the illegal nature of the occupation, condemned in repeated resolutions in the UN General Assembly and Security Council, resulted in the death of some 200,000 East Timorese, almost a third of the entire population. Many of the generals, leaders within the Indonesian military, TNI and Kopassus, in Timor-Leste at that time were subsequently promoted due to their outstanding achievements and now currently manage the resistance fighters in West Papua today. Indeed, the recent elections in Indonesia included a presidential candidate linked to a myriad of human rights abuses in Timor-Leste, as identified by the UN Truth and Reconciliation Commission, with no call to account. It is understandable that such travesties of justice give rise to heartfelt, passionate debate, not only in Timor but throughout the region. Activists in both Australia and Indonesia alike are often challenged by the enduring visions of the revered former resistance leader, Kerala Gusmao, in the notion that true freedom, independence and reconciliation is best served when Timorese turn their hearts and minds to the future, and in doing so allow past wounds and the pain of injustices to heal. However, there are those that would suggest that the Timorese leaders are in fact denying justice by not demanding accountability for gross human right violations and should be endorsing the recommendations of the UN in protecting inalienable rights. As this quest for national reconciliation and identity continues, it is impossible to ignore the overwhelming pragmatic realities of Timor-Leste's vulnerabilities. Being the poorest nation in Southeast Asia and sharing porous land and sea borders with its former occupier, that also happens to be the most populous nation in our region. Indeed, Timor-Leste's very economic survival is dependent upon the geopolitical sphere in which it operates. Perhaps it is for others in the region who are better resourced and positioned to take up those calls for international justice on behalf of their Timorese brothers and sisters. The celebrations of Timor-Leste's hard-fought independence will be indelibly printed into the memories of those privileged to bear witness to this occasion. The David and Goliath murderous struggle over 25 years, with a depleted force of men and women, numbering only in the hundreds, equipped with little more than ideology, endured, and were able to secure freedom and independence that many thought impossible. It captured the attention, imagination and respect of the world. Timor-Leste was catapulted to the centre stage of the international community, and whilst the celebrations burned brightly, the tiny half-island played host to visits by the world's most influential leaders and received invitations to address the United Nations, parliaments, corporations and universities throughout the world. Foreign aid flowed in, with more than $8 billion spent in Timor between 2000 and 2007. Australia has been a primary aid donor since independence, providing approximately $1 billion in official assistance during that time. And yet, during that same time, poverty increased by a minimum of 15% throughout the population. There was very little to be seen for this massive expenditure in terms of infrastructure, development, or an improvement in the basic conditions of life for the majority of citizens. The reason is, of course, that the bulk of those $8 billion didn't even reach Timor-Leste's coffers. They didn't go through the systems to strengthen capacities or align to preferred programs of service delivery. Most of the money was spent on technical assistance, frequently sourced from the donor nation itself. When considering the sustainability, effectiveness and value of foreign aid contributions, it is vital to look at the inextricable links between notions of ownership and sovereignty. The government and people of Timor-Leste did not have ownership of the bilateral aid expenditure, and whilst it may have brought some benefits to the nation, it was not sustainable investment because it had not been mindful of the needs, priorities and stated goals of the people of Timor and their leaders. In July 2011, the Timorese government launched the National Strategic Development Plan. It lays out a vision for the nation's development over the next 20 years and sets forth some of the key challenges across all sectors, from economic development to health and education, and proposes achievable solutions with manageable timeframes. This is a vital document for all development when assessing and putting into context the vast number of opportunities that exist. Since 2004, Timor-Leste has moved from being entirely aid dependent to now being well below the average of low-income economies, with a 10% aid to gross national income ratio. It has developed the skills and wherewithal to articulate its needs and priorities, and is even leading the way on the global stage. Timor-Leste leads the G7+, a grouping of some 17 nations representing 350 million of the world's poorest and most vulnerable citizens, including Nepal, Liberia, the Solomon Islands and South Sudan. At the Millennium Summit in New York in 2011, the G7+ countries said in a statement, "External mandates and ideas can no longer be imposed on our countries, on our regions and on our peoples. we believe that good international partnerships begin with mutual respect. The Australian government dramatically slashed aid, not only to Timor but to the entire foreign aid budget in May of this year, and will see a reduction in international programs of $7.6 billion over the next 5 years. It leverages blame for questionable outcomes on the recipient nations themselves, and in direct contradiction to the aspirations of the Millennium Goals in developing nations, has now declared foreign aid as an instrument of economic diplomacy, not poverty reduction. This is why AusAid has been abolished and incorporated into the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Terms and conditions will be applied to aid grants, and fund recipients, now known as economic partners, will be subject to stringent performance benchmarks. These ideological shifts force us to question the very role of aid. Is it to assist in poverty reduction or to subsidise Australian trade? Is it to support United Nations Millennium Goals or to facilitate offshore detention and refugee resettlements? As we struggle to find answers to such propositions, so much more than jargon will be lost in translation amongst the world's most vulnerable. Such complexities and being at the whim of political winds with conflicting agendas, we turn and find our hope and solace in the most enduring relations, those between communities and people to people. Australian volunteers and friends in Timor-Leste are held in the highest regard for their unparalleled generosity and enthusiasm in embracing Timorese, their families, culture, traditions and languages. There is a respect and an acceptance of the differences and a readiness to learn. Whilst I'm speaking in generalities by necessity, these virtues hold true when characterising Australians in action in Timor. The most striking example of this is the number of people who commit to learning and speaking Teton while they're spending time in Dili and throughout the remote districts. Very often, for many of us at the latter end of the life cycle, Australians are found studying their first language other than English in Dili. We invariably make mistakes, we massacre the sentence construction, and our accent has an unfortunate way of trampling over the musicality of the extraordinary, beautiful local languages. And yet, we are only ever rewarded with patience, encouragement, and sincere appreciation for showing respect to the Timorese by trying and giving it a go. In my position within the Office of Kerferd Oration, I've had the pleasure of meeting literally hundreds of Australians coming to Timor to offer what they can, whether that be financial support, knowledge, teaching, work experience, capacity building, material goods, scholarships, cultural exchanges, homestays, and they do it all with a very, very genuine expression of friendship throughout. Within the office, we then look to network in an effort to best partner these generous offers and needs as we know them to exist on the ground. With extensive collaborations with government departments and international agencies, we are able to share contacts and details of programs that will work best in supporting the main focuses of the National Strategic Development Plan. Many of you will have heard of the Alola Foundation that Kerferd Oration founded, established back in 2001, and an organisation that remains the leading national NGO supporting and empowering the most vulnerable women and children in Timor. Once heavily reliant on international friends and funds, this organisation is now capably directed by Timorese, the majority of whom are women, operating in all 13 districts and employing over 140 people. their achievements in supporting the Millennium Development Goals, such as exclusive breastfeeding and improving the infant and maternal mortality rates in Timor-Leste, underscore the organisation's motto of strong women, strong nation. In her capacity as Goodwill Ambassador for Education, Kirsty and her office additionally hosts a number of projects aimed at addressing educational priorities. The most significant of these is the collaboration forged with the Ministry of Education and UNESCO, in which pilots have been established in 3 language districts, incorporating multilingual-based curriculums in preschools and primary schools. Recent laws have been passed that will see children being able to learn in their mother tongue initially in pre-primary, later transitioning to Teton and later still to Portuguese. And we're still only in primary school. Grades 7 and 8 in high school then include the additional languages of the working languages of the nation being Bahasa and English. The opportunity of dramatically improving literacy outcomes came away by way of the results demonstrated in the pilots. The pilots had only been possible with the commitment of linguists, educators and professors in Australia, offering wise counsel pro bono and encouraging UNESCO and the World Bank to come on board with the vital funding needed from there on in. School infrastructure is sorely inadequate. Currently, only 10% of Timorese children aged between 3 and 6 are attending any classes. And to add to this, the government is committed to building at least 253 new preschools. An additional 566 primary and secondary schools are also to be completed by 2030. Exacerbating this task ahead is the fact that 70% of existing schools require repairs and renovations and extensions. These ambitious targets will be difficult on so many levels, and Timor-Leste will be reliant on international friends well into the future to ensure these goals are realised. To that end, one of the projects I am most proud of is the opportunity to manage the school building program in remote communities. With an extraordinary team of Timorese, we liaise with the Ministry of Education, local communities and contractors in regards to building requirements, with all funds once again being raised by pikelet scone sales back in Australia. Following the construction period, we continue to respond to the needs in teacher training, educational supplies and water and sanitation priorities. We have completed 9 schools at this time and have exciting plans for a further 5 in 2015. One such opportunity exists in Atauro, and I am keen to explore a collaboration between the Office of Kirsty Sword-Gusmao and the Indigo Atauro Friendship Group. Friendship groups are a shining example of how ordinary people come together and achieve extraordinary, significant and sustainable outcomes for many. There are now over 40 groups throughout Australia who have partnered with communities throughout Timor, just as the highly respected Indigo Atauro Friendship Group, who are making remarkable headway in supporting education, health and economic development initiatives. The recent Friendship Conference that was held in Melbourne just these last 2 days revealed extraordinary passion and rigorous support for the next 10 years of support that people are looking to invest in Timor-Leste's road to prosperity and true independence. At that particular occasion, I was, by way of an invitation by the Vice Minister for Pre-Primary and Basic Education, Senora Mana Dulce Suarez, allowed the opportunity to present details of an incredibly reformed curriculum for pre-primary and primary school in Timor-Leste. It was in response to the overwhelming facts that the curriculum that had been designed in times of emergency in the early 2000s, designed by international advisors outside of the country, with little and no reference to anything in Timor-Leste, was failing the children desperately. It became apparent that it was no exaggeration to suggest that the nation was at risk of losing another generation. The World Bank did a survey and found that 70% of children in grade 1 and grade 2 could not recognise a single word in either Teton or Portuguese. 70% of all students drop out of school before year 9. The highest percentage dropouts occur in grades 1 and 2. Terrifying on every level, and could not continue. And in recognition of that, there is a new curriculum that is about to be launched next year that is uniquely Timorese. It is in Teton and not just in Portuguese, and reflects those examples in science and geography of the local terrain, the country, the culture and traditions, to enable people to promote self-identity and national identity. Accompanying that curriculum is also the very ambitious target of the introduction of teaching methodologies that we take for granted in Australia, but whereby it is activity-centred. It allows for participation and engaging interaction with young children who are encouraged to ask questions, to make mistakes and to build confidence through those interactions. This is sadly lifetimes away from the realities of the chalk and talk that currently exists in Timor-Leste. And as an example of the way in which we can be responding to the very direct needs in our region, the Vice Minister for Education made a humble and heartfelt plea to all friendship groups to consider providing people the opportunity to come and spend time mentoring the teachers in remote areas throughout Timor-Leste, in walking with them in making this huge transition, both with content, language and teaching methodologies. It was incredibly heartening, the response that we had. And it will take me a while to be able to be professional enough without crying when I speak to the Vice Minister next week to tell her of the amazing reaction and the fact that the Aussies are there and just, they're on board and they're walking with all Timorese. In terms of the Rural School Development Program, I have been absolutely delighted to have met recently Leslie Milne, Wendy and Rick Thwaites, and learning of the incredible teacher training initiatives that they've been employing on Atauro Island. In learning of their endeavours, I'm looking to take a leaf out of their book and include a number of those elements into the Rural School Development Program. This year marks the Indigo Atauro Friendship Group's 6th anniversary, and I have been asked to convey the heartfelt appreciation of both the Prime Minister and Kirsty Sword-Guzmão, with the sincerest desire to see your works continue. Community-to-community relations have been so successful in Timor-Leste that the government is responding in kind. A new program set to revolutionise the manner in which infrastructure and services are delivered without the constraints of centralised bureaucracies is set to take place this year. Launched in June 2012, Programa Nacional de Desenvolvimento Suco, or National Programme for Village Development, is valued at $300 million over the next 8 years. And it will contribute to rural development by funding the missing link to services, basic education infrastructure, or village infrastructure, and provide jobs and training. The government is providing each village with an annual grant of between $40,000 and $70,000 to plan, construct and manage their own small-scale infrastructure projects. These might include such examples of, we have a clinic on the other side of the riverbed that's only accessible during the dry season. So heaven help you when you're pregnant and requiring medical services in the wet season. So it may be that these communities come together and determine that their monies are best spent in looking at a bridge or even ambitiously road access to link that particular clinic back to the school and back to the hub of where the community is actually residing. The potential outcomes of this process are enormous, and the opportunities of navigating consensus, maintaining public scrutiny and accountability of funds, along with developing notions of social participation, will contribute greatly to building communities in Timor. There are many, many challenges ahead for our closest neighbour. It remains the poorest nation in Southeast Asia and has the highest proportion of children under 5, moderately or severely stunted through malnutrition in the world. For women, giving birth continues to be the most dangerous thing that she will do. And yet, it is both heartening and inspiring to consider the strength of friendships and the tremendous optimism for what is possible. In closing, 2014 will see a further opportunity for Australia to choose to finally repay the debt of honour of World War II. A long overdue acknowledgement of Timor-Leste's sovereign rights in relation to maritime boundaries, gas and oil resources in the Timor Sea would contribute in a very significant way to reducing the gap of wealth, privilege and quality of life separating our two great countries. This gesture would not be born out of either generosity or altruism. It would be because it is right and it is just. From my Timor heart to yours, I thank you for listening. Obrigada, Barak.
Jenny now has a short film that she's going to play. I don't know if you want to say anything else.
If there was ever an opportunity for this community to attach itself to an issue of social justice, I know of none greater. I'm very proud to share with you a short video that was put together with the passionate and enduring efforts of Sister Susan Connolly from the Mary MacKillop Institute in Sydney. And I leave those sentiments with you today. Thank you once again.
I'm sure that some of you have questions that you would like to ask Jenny. This would be a good opportunity for you to do that, so please keep your questions brief and tell us your name as well. So. There's one down this end.
Tim Fisher, congratulations, Jenny. Yes, travel safely tomorrow, back through Darwin, I assume. On the matter of the boundary, I think there's a very complex set of arguments. East Timor employed son of John Kenneth Galbraith to be a very spiky representative and a fair representative of their side of things. I have read in The Economist, but for him, a fair agreement would have been reached. That may be an unfair comment. I'll leave that to one side. My question is twofold. Firstly, you're probably aware Canada has also switched their aid agency back into their DFAT. If it eliminates duplicated back rooms and saves 1% on the $5 billion of foreign aid that is continuing to be given by the Australian government to the world, that equals $50 million. Is that not a good thing? Building efficiency into the backroom operations of this huge government set of organisations, MFA, DFAT and AusAid. I accept that there's a separate argument of the actuality of the programs which you have detailed here today. My final question, so that's one, and the second one is languages. You mentioned them several times. I may be wrong, but I go to Bhutan quite a bit to look at small nation progress. And Bhutan is booming, and I'll give you one of the reasons they're booming. 40 years ago, the fourth king adopted English as the language of instruction across 17 dialects, valleys. The bit of aid they get from Australia is for tertiary scholarships at our universities. They do very well, all expenses paid, and they all hasten to go back home and deliver for their country. East Timor made a decision to adopt Portuguese and stubbornly stuck with it. There is evidence that that is now diminishing the GDP and the educational capability to this day. That may be right, that may be wrong. I invite your comment on whether it's not too late, patronising as it is, for East Timor to adopt a language of great universality for their own sakes, not for our sakes, for their own sakes, or at least adopt Tatum, because Portuguese is hindering their genuine educative and economic progress. You may well disagree. I'd be delighted to hear your view.
Mr. Fisher, can I say what an honour it is to have you in the audience today, and I thank you for your questions and the way in which you articulated them. Your tremendous experience and knowledge in these areas resonates. I hope my answers will do your questions justice. In regards to the transformations, reforms, adjustments, reprioritising that's occurring within the foreign aid distribution from the Australian government at this point in time, I'm sure there wouldn't be one of us who would not look for more effective outcomes, and the opportunity to review the way in which monies are spent is a critical factor and a critical part of those relations. I would wholeheartedly support any initiative that gives us sustainable outcomes back in the recipient or the donor, from the donor's point of view, back into the recipient's countries. I would wholeheartedly support that. Where I query it is when our agendas and the role of that aid become distorted. Either distorted or a reflection of the values that we hold in one of the most privileged, wealthiest societies in this world. The opportunity to hear the needs and respond accordingly are very, very clear, and they may or may not resonate with our expectations. Whether we have the foresight and the wisdom to be able to separate that, to take out our own agendas, life experiences or expectations, to fully support donor countries in that respect is the challenge that faces us all. I believe that the role of foreign aid is one that will challenge us for a long period of time to come, not only as a result of slashing the budget at the moment, but we do need to consider what is it that drives us to give and what are our expectations in return. As a segue to your question, an excellent question and comment about the role of languages. It is important to be able to see the link between aid and languages in our relationship with Timor-Leste again. It disappointed many in Australia that English was not selected as one of the official languages of Timor-Leste. And I would suggest that there is possibly no more frequent question than I am actually asked. Why is it that English was not selected? I would offer you this thought, that in the history of Timor-Leste, English does not resonate. It is 500 years of Portuguese influence, not only through language, but through the traditions, the culture and the manifestations of those lifestyles that resonates with the Timorese. The Timorese revere the language of Portuguese. There is also the role that Portugal played throughout the resistance that is those bonds are very, very strong. So there's cultural links there that allowed and was part of the basis for the country making that determination to choose Portuguese. Having said that, the people who revere the language of Portuguese are those who speak it. And it is estimated that only 5 to 10% of the population of Timor-Leste speaks Portuguese fluently. I would offer you the thought that whilst English is not an official language, that the younger generations need no help and no suggestions as to where they see their preferred language. And I think for any of us who have been over there, we would be very, very much familiar with the requests that we meet from all young people for the opportunity just to sit and talk so that we can learn a little bit more through English. So I think we have that balance of the government making an official announcement that reflects the cultural and customs of the nation and traditions. And yet, as ever, it will be the younger generations that will create their own destinies as well, of which English will feature very prominently.
We have a question up here.
Thank you. Could I just thank you? My name is Chris O'Lone. I'm an educator, proud to say that. Proud to say that I believe that education is the answer, but education needs to be supported. And that's really the premise of my question. How? How can we support you? Specifically, how can schools support you? Why do I ask that question? I believe children have an innate need and wish to assist. All they need are for the adults in the community to say how and get on with it. Could you perhaps assist with that? And I'm talking primary level here. Second, the people, you were speaking there before, some of those horrendous ways that monies were spent. Why? Because they didn't get to the community. I understand there are projects about that do get to the community directly, and I would like, if you know of, perhaps you have contacts that would assist that direct assistance. Finally, leaving politics aside, if possible, and I know that's not really possible, but leaving it aside, I would suggest that there would be a hue and cry to assist if your voice could be heard broad and wide across this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions, Chris, and I admire educators throughout the world and have the privilege of meeting you today, and thank you. Chris, in terms of the first question, in terms of what is it that we can be doing to support these overwhelming needs, particularly in primary schools, there is this very specific hot off the press call to action that I made reference to in my presentation, which is the opportunity to call on ideally qualified educators such as yourself but others who have been the recipient of our quality education to come and assist in a mentoring capacity with teachers on the ground in Timor-Leste. We're under no illusions about just how challenging this transition is going to be. The opportunity for children to learn through fun, to be able to sing, to dance, to laugh, to joke and still be learning their values and virtues, that we have appreciated what the results are and the impact are. But the educators in Timor are still yet to appreciate that. And this transition is going to take time. So that's one very specific area. But I'm very conscious too that many of us are not in a position to put our lives on hold back here. So the other ways that we can be supporting is that there will now be a huge, huge need for all of the educational supplies that we'll need to be able to support those teaching methodologies, such as in a school in Timor-Leste at the moment. Many of you will appreciate that it is no exaggeration to be working on a dirt floor with or without furniture and a blackboard. That is it. To have these ambitious notions of interactive teaching pedagogies introduced, we need those basic staples of cardboard, scissors, glue, rulers, fishing line and pegs to hang the posters and work throughout the walls, the coloured textures that are needed, the pin boards, again, these basic staples that we take for granted. We're going to need a heap of them, a stack of them. And there are opportunities there through linking with friendship groups who are already working with schools in many of the districts in Timor-Leste to look at not only the provision of the materials and or the funds, even better, because then they can be purchased in Timor-Leste, but the ways of delivering those particular materials out into the schools as well. I hope that answered your question.
Yep, we've got a question down here in the middle. There's a microphone heading your way.
Hi Jenny, James Sloane's my name. Thank you for your talk today. I really appreciated it. My involvement or knowledge of Timor-Leste as a tourist only, I was involved in taking part in 2 mountain bike races, a tour of Timor. It appeared to me at the time Timor seemed to get some benefit from this type of activity, and I wonder what your comment is in regard to the encouragement of tourism generally. This was obviously, it's not a wealthy country, and the observations I made were that there are certain types of people would go, and the people I was involved with, there were massive, relatively wealthy adventure tourists taking part, but that seemed to have some future potential. And I'm just wondering whether that type of activity, not mountain biking as such, but other types of adventure tourism has some potential benefit for a developing country like Timor-Leste.
James, I concur with your thoughts completely in terms of both the opportunities for tourism and also the opportunity to create a unique niche market for Timor-Leste as well. Timor-Leste doesn't need to aim to become another Bali, if you like. And it will attract the terrain, the culture being as unique as it is. Its very history and the relationship with Australia gives it that opportunity to carve out its own unique way of representing itself. And then, of course, pragmatically and practically speaking, it will be a long time before mainstream tourism would be able to take off, when we're still challenged with electricity supplies, for instance, and water quality. Not even hot water, just quality. So it would be a while. And in that respect, it is going to appeal to the adventurers, if you like, those people who are intrigued by the history of Timor, that want to experience it firsthand and to play a part in this new nation's future will have the greatest appeal. The Tour de Timor is a fantastic, successful initiative that derived out of José Ramos Horta's office. And the support from cyclists in the region, it's just extraordinary and has done so much, if only for the word of mouth that it generates back in Australia, with people going, you went to Timor, and isn't that dangerous? So even to be able to have that type of conversation does so much to raise the profile and give the true reflection of Timor-Leste in 2014. So I am so grateful to the cyclists, particularly when they need to endure all of the very confused Timorese going, what the heck are they doing? So my admiration and my hats off to all of the cyclists in very, very demanding terrain. I have great admiration for you.
I think we got two more questions, one at the back and then one down the front following that.
Hello, Jenny. Mark for Barkin. I'm a resident of Indigo Shire, but I work at another council. I'm very interested if you'd like to comment on the decentralisation of state administration, and that is the transfer into a more Victorian style of local government throughout the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and lovely to see you again outside of Dili this time. Even though you are from another council, I think that's still okay. Yeah. Yes. Government instrumentalities, decentralisation, centralised structures. I'll be the first to say this really isn't my area of expertise. The opportunities to become less focused on only Dili, which represents only 10% of the population, and focus on the needs that are occurring in real Timor, as I call it, which is out of the cities and in the mountains and remote areas for 90% of the population. That opportunity that decentralisation offers excites me a great deal. It also provides for opportunities of more accountability. There's more public scrutiny if communities are closer to where the decision-making is actually taking place. And I think in that respect, there's really healthy reasons to be optimistic with healthy outcomes in that area as well. I am conscious that it is a reflection of the way in which the Victorian government, it's a blueprint that the Victorian government has used, and I wonder how easily and readily that's going to translate to the way in which Timor-Leste has a formal and an informal power structure. In a democracy, there is still a kingdom, there are still kings that exist, and there's a power base there as well. And then, of course, you've got the third leading influential sector, which is the church as well. So I look forward to seeing how decentralisation can actually bring those three silos closer together. And again, I hold optimism for it. My true confidence remains with the people and the way in which they demand accountability of their government in a decentralised or centralised format.
And one more question. Michael down the front here, I think.
Thank you, Jenny. Better take this. Thank you. Thank you. So, Michael Curtin. I'm interested in the friendships groups. You mentioned them in your talk, and you've just been to a workshop on them. I wonder how friendships groups truly meet the needs of Timorese people, and also meet the needs of people outside the communities that they are friendships with, because I wonder if there are communities in Timor that don't have that relationship. And so how can, I guess, the benefits, if there are, be more equitable, and how can friendships groups truly understand what the needs are in the community that they're befriending?
That is an excellent question, and I think it encapsulates the way in which and the reason why friendship groups are so successful, because of the way in which you're not nervous in challenging your ability to be able to deliver what are sustainable outcomes. That opportunity to ask those hard questions, am I doing this because it makes me feel good, Or am I doing it because it's really having an impact? Am I doing it because I really like Abilio and his family? Or should I be putting it somewhere else? Being involved in supporting developing nations, from my humble experience, has been the most challenging thing I've ever done. We are forced to challenge everything that we do and to challenge the reasons why we do it. And the fact that we challenge ourselves is why I believe we get closer to being more effective in that respect. It also allows us to listen and to learn. Having said that, there are a number of ways that we can improve and access more information to be able to evaluate if this program on Aotearoa Island, is that what other friendship groups are doing, and or how does it fit in with the National Strategic Development Plan, and is it the way that we should be doing things? Is it the most effective? And that is my unwavering support for more forums such as this and the Friendship Conference that allows us to raise these questions and learn from each other. There's so much experience and knowledge amongst those 40 groups of friendship groups, but we're all in silos and we're not sharing it, which means that we're limited because we have to go ahead and make all of our mistakes and lose money and trust the wrong system, or we didn't get the right piece of legislation in place. We've got to make all of those mistakes individually. And I believe more collectively we can shorten that time frame in becoming experienced. The other opportunity, of course, is to effectively partner and find key contacts with national and local agencies on the ground in Timor-Leste. There were hundreds, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of NGOs that were all born in the first few years after independence because everybody was needing money. So everybody learnt really, really quickly, well, what you do is you set up an NGO and you say that you're looking after education and agriculture, and they became like mini governments everywhere, these NGOs. Now, they've clearly weeded themselves out because they didn't have the capabilities, the capacity to be able to affect that and to manage those funds in a way that was equitable and with robust governance structures. The majority of those have been weeded out. And when you start to look at the likes of NGOs like Redi Feto, for instance, and Fundación Alola and Bilun and IAM, they're sound, and you've got Timorese there who are now working alongside internationals who can navigate all of those cultural and language barriers and allow us to get to the heart of where those monies desperately need to be. So again, through our friendships and our contacts.
Thank you again, Jenny. I'd like to take this opportunity to say that I enjoyed your speech, your presentation immensely. It was very insightful and deeply emotive, so thank you again. I'd like to invite the Chair of the Aotearoa Island Friendship Committee, Ms Leslie Milne, to come forward and say a few words about the work of the Friendship Committee. Please welcome Leslie.
Thanks, everybody, and thank you very much, Jenny. Lost for words. I'm only going to say a couple of things. One is, who are the friends of Aotearoa Island? Well, they're all of us. The friendship group involves the citizens of Indigo Shire and beyond, and the committee is only the Section 86 committee of council, who are a community committee advising council. The real friendship group is the whole of the Shire. And so the question then comes, what does it mean to be a friend of Aotearoa, which my husband Michael very well flagged. And if you remember the founding principles of the friendship groups, which are respect, sustainability, meaning we're in it for the long haul, not a fly-in, fly-out relationship, and the very core relationships, building relationships, which Jenny has returned to again and again. And I think that I would just return to the words of Stephen Covey, that what makes a strong and respectful relationship is seeking first to understand, and that being able to listen and being present for the other people, our friends in Timor, setting aside our own agendas and our thoughts and our ideas and our solutions, which is very hard to do if you're excited and enthusiastic and passionate about the work you want to do with our friends in Timor, and the added complication of language differences, but seeking first to listen. And if any of us are travelling to Timor or to Atauro, I think that's the biggest thing that we can remember, and to spend time listening and asking questions and then listening some more. Respectful relationships that provide support without undermining local control and not working from any kind of expert model, but walking alongside our friends on their journey, respecting local skills and understanding their cultural norms. And in order to do this, because we live so very far away, partnerships with our Timorese friends and organisations are really the only way that we can make our friendship really rich. And we rely on building strong partnerships with government and non-government staff like HIAM. And in fact, we are honoured to have with us today the director of the Learning Resource Development Centre in Dili, who has been working with our friendship group for the past 3 years to help deliver a teacher training program to primary schools on Atauro Island, a 5-week intensive course. And that is, would you like to stand up? Senor Francisco Jorge dos Santos. Thank you. And he has been really fantastic in helping us to understand what really the needs are in those individual schools, which they truly are, with mud floors and a blackboard and very little else. So all I really need to say to you today, that if you're considering supporting the work of the friendship group in any financial way, that it really helps us to plan and to budget for the projects that we're supporting. If people can make some kind of a small but regular donation is far more useful than a one-off, more generous donation. So I'd just like to leave you with the idea of the cup of coffee, the cappuccino which we're sharing, that Jenny's talk was titled, that if you were to take a cup of coffee every day of your working week, how many of you get a coffee every day? So if you were to take a cup of coffee, the cost of a cup of coffee, 5 days a week for a year, you would cover the cost of supporting a student at university for a year. And if you got together with 4 work colleagues, you would be able to help support a 5-week intensive teacher training course delivered by the team that Francisco heads up. So it doesn't take very much, and it's especially good if it can be regular. So on your seats there are some details about how you might be able to do that. And finally, Jenny said very powerfully that the way for friendship groups really to work best is to work together and to communicate, and for our own community to communicate and share their ideas and see that they're aligned to the strategic plan and to local government needs. And so to that end, I'd like to invite you to the conversations we're having as a lead-out event of this year's Kerferd Oration on the 31st of August at the George Kerferd restaurant from 3 till 5. Come and have a cafe conversation and see where we can take this. And of course, there's the curry night on the 23rd here in Barmutha Park, where you might want to come and... Would you like to say anything for that, Anne? So if you want to come to the curry night, there are flyers around on the tables as well. So thank you very much indeed.
I now invite Indigo Shire Junior Councillor, Indigo Stelling Walker, to speak about the involvement of the Indigo Shire with Aotearoa Island. Please welcome Indigo.
Thanks, Amy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Indigo Walker Stelling, and I was a Junior Indigo Shire Councillor representing Beechworth Montessori School last year. Edie Farlett and I are here to talk about Aotearoa Island and Indigo Shire's involvement with it. Aotearoa Island is an island off the coast of East Timor. It is roughly 25 kilometres from the mainland, about 24 kilometres long and 9 kilometres wide. The island has a population of about 8,000 people, mainly fishermen and farmers living in a very economically poor community. The island has 5 districts: Bikweli, Beloi, Makadade, Makwili and Villa Mormeta. Each district has many small villages. Former Shire Councillor Francis Walsh formed the Indigo Shire Junior Council in 2003. This was a group of Grade 5 representatives, one from every school in the Shire, meeting once a month. Every year, a new councillor is elected from each school. Their aim is to raise funds for Indigo Shire facilities like CFA, swimming pools, etc. In 2004, the Junior Council agreed to also raise funds for the Roman Luan Kindergarten on Aotearoa Island. Since then, they have raised other funds for the island as well. They have sent books and writing utensils to schools, sent letters and cards, soccer jumpers and built composting toilets there, which was $600 to $700 each. Fundraising methods students used included pyjama days, crazy hair days and food and drink retail. Friendship with another country means a lot to me. Helping other people in need gives me a real sense of euphoria, and I enjoyed fundraising for them. My fellow student, Edie Farlett, was not able to join us today, but we were able to video her message last week.
Hello everyone, my name is Edie Farlett and I am this year's Beechworth Montessori student representative for the Indigo Shire Junior Council. Alex Entwistle, another Year 5 student from Beechworth Montessori, assisted with the organisation of my pyjama/onesie day for the Junior Council fundraiser. I really enjoyed fundraising for this event because we got to make posters and do all sorts of advertising. What made it extra fun that it was on the last day of term and Montessori doesn't have many dress-up days. I raised $81 and I'm hoping to have one at the end of this term. Friendship with another country is a lot like having a friend. You share good times, you're respectful, and most of all you help them. It is great that Indigo Shire Junior Council can have friendship with another country. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Edie, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Indigo. I welcome to the stage Mrs. Jennifer Locke, the great-granddaughter of George Briscoe Kerferd, to present the Oration Medal to Jenny. So I invite Jenny back to the stage as well. It is fitting that the name of George Briscoe Kerferd lives on to inspire community action and social justice.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to take 30 seconds to express on behalf of my family, the descendants of George Briscoe, and my brother Robert and my newly found cousin Ian here, on behalf of the family, how immensely grateful we are to the George Briscoe Kerferd Oration Committee for perpetuating the memory and the legacy of George Briscoe Kerferd in such an amazing way as this oration, which was so moving and illuminating and challenging in terms of social justice and equity, which our great-grandfather, I believe, had spades of. So thank you very much for your continued work, and we're enormously grateful. And it gives me tremendous pleasure now to present this George Briscoe Kerferd Oration Medal.
Thank you, Jennifer. It appears that Francisco has a gift that he would like to give to Jenny as well. It's a taius, which is a traditional Timorese woven cloth. And coffee. Just down here is the Oration Honour Board listing our speakers since 2003, and today will be added the name of Jenny Coles. So once again, thank you to Jenny Coles. I now invite the Chair of the Kerferd Oration Committee, Ian McKinlay, to the stage.
To acknowledge the work of the Aotearoa Island Friendship Committee, and to particularly Leslie Milne and her group of dedicated members who have done a heap of work in the lead-up events to this year's oration. And to also to Leslie works on the Oration Committee this year. Without Leslie, we wouldn't have had the oration. So as a token of recognition, I'd like to present you a small bouquet and to say thank you. And I'd also like to say thank you to our MC, Amy Thwaites. Not only has she done a wonderful job today, but if you think about it, without Amy's idea, we wouldn't be here today, because we wouldn't be celebrating a relationship with Timor-Leste and in particular with Aotearoa Island. So thank you, Amy. And you might notice that Amy gets a slightly bigger bunch than Leslie. And that's because it's Amy's 21st birthday on Wednesday. So this is a double bouquet to say thank you and happy birthday.
Thank you, Ian. On behalf of everybody present today, I would like to thank all the people involved in the creation of this year's oration. There's some listed in the program, but I'd like to make a special mention of the sponsors, La Trobe University, WAW Credit Union and Indigo Shire. And I also like to thank our auspicing body, the Beechworth Neighbourhood Centre. You might have seen when you came in earlier, but there's some display tables at the back of the hall. The proceeds from any sales of the Timorese products will go towards the friendship community, the friendship group, and also please fill out the survey. The committee do appreciate the feedback. And now I invite you all to join us in sharing together the community lunch, celebrating the 12th Kerferd Oration. The lunch, I believe, is going to be at the back, up there. It has been made by the men from the Beechworth Correctional Centre in conjunction with the B&C's Neighbourhood Kitchen. So once again, thank you for today.